worried about business in the sense of failing, but it just seems like you all, like, it was just second nature of starting businesses and running businesses.
You know, Jared, that's a really interesting concept. I never really thought too much through. I think when you set out to do something and you have a good plan and a good strategy and you ask the right questions and have a good team of people, something that's well thought out, I think the thought of failure just doesn't even cross your mind until perhaps you're approaching the edge of it, right?
Rodney, thanks for joining.
Hey, Jared, my pleasure.
Well, I had the pleasure of meeting your brother last fall. I think you were busy at the time, but made my first trip to Lancaster County and absolutely loved it. We have yet to release the video. We did Earl Martin last month, and then I think your brother's video will come out within the next couple weeks or month. But yeah, just love meeting your actually two brothers, Ryan, and then your younger brother too, right? The youngest.
Yeah, Scott. And actually, typically when my brother asks something, I just drop what I'm doing and come. And he asked me if I could stop over and see you and shake hands with you, but it just didn't work out that day. So
next time, for sure.
For sure.
But yeah, he was explaining a little about what you did. We've had a couple communications and conversations, and wanted to introduce you to our audience on BulkLoads. But yeah, high level, Rodney, before we talk about what you do, talk about just a little bit about the Garber history.
Yeah, it's a rich history in the sense of just incredible legacy. Both sides of my family, actually, but the Garber side taught me everything I know about entrepreneurship and leading businesses from a people perspective. And, you know, grew up on a farm, and my brother Ryan, who you were talking about, actually was the one who really gravitated towards the farming and sort of that hard work. I think he was operating a combine by the time he was 6 or 7 or something like that. But so beautiful heritage of hard work, farming, agriculture, transportation, trucking, and really from an entrepreneurial bend. And so it really has been a privilege. And I think the greatest thing that comes to mind is just, you know, leadership that put God first and honored God in everything that they did. And I think a large part of any of the success that we have is really due to that. And so that's kind of the Garbers. We get it wrong a lot, but that's one of the things we really try and do, is keep a biblical worldview and treat people like people. You know, it's really what it's all about.
Did you work in the family business growing up? Did you help with the trucking and farming, or?
Yeah. So, I mean, growing up on a farm, I had all the great odd jobs. And of course, we fed heifers at 5 a.m. before school every morning and did all that stuff. But as I got older, I was really more into sports. And my brother had really taken the bull by the horns when it came to stepping into the family business, and it was more gravitated towards that. And I think it took me a little while till I got a little older to really realize the heritage of farming and transportation. But I will tell you that my family got some really good counsel. There was, my dad was in partnership with his dad and his brother, and they got some really good counsel coming along. And one of the things early on, I remember about 15 years old, we sat with these consultants. And at the time, I didn't really have a clue what we were, engaging in. But there was some really clear definitions of what it meant to actually work at Garber Farms and be a part of that from an employment perspective. And at the time, it wasn't just that you didn't earn it just because of your last name, right? You had to work away from the business for a period of time, and then step into when an opportunity presented itself. So it was a really neat way of doing a family business. We called it a business family rather than a family business. And so got some good counsel on that. So to answer your question, there wasn't an opportunity directly as I was heading off after high school and into college. And so I went and did the college thing, which got a great education, went to Shippensburg University, got my bachelor's degree. And when I came home, there was a lot of other opportunities outside the business, which I pursued. And while I have a deep passion for Garber business and GFI and our farms, the stars just never aligned in that way. And all of that story is unfolding now as the amazing work that I get to do and the clients I get to serve. If I'd be a part of the family business directly, I wouldn't have this opportunity to serve clients the way that we do. So, kind of a roundabout journey. And interestingly enough, I thought there was going to be a path to driving truck. And it turned out by the time that I was 18, I had too many points on my driver's license and ended up losing it. And my dad told me how impossible it would be to get me insured. So that was a hard no, and kind of closed that door for me. So,
Yeah. You and your wife had a business too, right? Before the actual coaching too, right? That you ended up building and selling. Can you talk about that a little bit?
yeah. So, again, entrepreneur family. And my dad came to me back in, it would have been right around 2010, and approached me with an opportunity, a friend of his that was selling a farm market. And at the time, I was working in property management, had a great job, but had always been looking for that next opportunity. So my wife and I together, we bought a market stand at the Central Market here in Lancaster. Actually, one of the most famous continuously operating farmers markets in the country. And so we bought a brand of jarred goods called Amish Family Recipes. Interestingly enough, on my mom's side, we have an incredible Amish heritage as well. And so that tied right into kind of our family deal, and bought the brand, and we sold jarred goods, and we ended up with two market stands and a bunch of wholesale accounts we sold online and distributed to family owned markets, gift shops, that type of thing. So we did that for about a little under 10 years. And as our kids were getting older, we wanted to get our weekend back. And so we talked and prayed through that and felt led to offer that for sale. And so we sold that in 2018.
Okay. Nice. And then from there, talk about the process. Well, I guess I want to back up a little bit because this is when you're talking about these businesses and your dad, the business family instead of family business. But I think some of us can get confused, or almost I shouldn't say confused, but worried about business in the sense of failing. But it just seems like you all, like, it was just second nature of starting businesses and running businesses.
Yeah, I mean, it would be naive to say that there was never the thought of failing or risk. I mean, I think that that thought comes with anything. Jared, that's a really interesting concept. I never really thought too much through. I think when you set out to do something and you have a good plan and a good strategy and you ask the right questions and have a good team of people, something that's well thought out, I think the thought of failure just doesn't even cross your mind until perhaps you're approaching the edge of it, right? Um, but yeah, I think there's a lot of that is just a mindset of failure isn't really an option. And even when you do come up against it, I think that's what true entrepreneurs do. They get creative. And at the same time, and failing is really at the definition of whoever creates the definition,
Yeah.
from one entrepreneur to another, failure could look very, very different. And I've seen a lot of doors closed that other people might call failure. I actually would say maybe that's why I kind of smirked at your comment, because I look at those as opportunities to try something new or to learn from it. So
Yeah, I guess I say in the sense of, you talk about your history and your family. Mine was quite the opposite of my grandpa starting a farming business and uh, not running it properly and having to sell the farm, and the banks coming in, and then my dad and uncles starting a business that ended up failing as well. And for me, being the third generation, being like, there's no way I'm ever going to be able to run a business because it's destined to fail. Like, every other family member has failed. How can this work for me? Well, I just think in the opposite. Like, you saw your grandpa's hard work and succeeding in business, even your dad's hard work. So you almost was second nature. Like, hey, it's going to be hard work, but I'm not going to fail because my family members haven't failed.
yeah, Jared, that's a really good perspective, and why I love interacting in stories like this, because you come from it from a whole different perspective.
Yeah.
And I would say one of the things that attributes to that, and I don't want to lay this on so thick, like that when you have a biblical worldview or faith, that everything's just going to work out for you, because that we know that's not true. That's not even reality. But I truly do attribute any success from the outside looking in, or even that we hold, really to that faith-filled way of doing business. And I know plenty of people who have that same worldview who have failed in business, right? And so So I don't know there's a magic thing there, but I do know that one of the things that was instilled in me early on is that people matter. And if
Hmm.
it's not truly a win-win where the organization can grow, and, if people can't grow along with you, um, and that includes not only just your team members, but vendors and clients and community members. So I consider it a great blessing. I don't know that we have the magic wand of what created success, and I'd love to learn more sometime about your family's history and whatnot too. But it can happen to anybody, and I think it's what we do with it and the perspective that we gain and learn from others is really what makes it, you know, for us to take a next step.
So you and your wife, you end up selling the business in 2018. Talk about what's going through your mind, or what's that thought process of what's next, because it's not like you
Yeah.
instantly had this idea of what you're doing today, right?
Yeah, no, we felt the timing to sell that and transition. We knew that it was time, and what I did have in my back pocket was, alongside of that, I was in our family real estate business, and we had some self storage on our farm property. That we had some buildings that were empty, and years ago, my dad and uncle were wise enough to transition that over, and so I immediately stepped into operating that full time, rather than on a part time basis. And so I did have that in my back pocket, but I read a book called The Last Arrow by Erwin McManus. And I will say this book really changed my life. I was at a season where I was, as you mentioned, kind of seeking, like, hey, what would be next? And the whole premise of this book that really opened my eyes. And I'm naturally wired this way for action and forward momentum, but this book really put the brevity of life right in front of me. And the whole idea, the concept is save nothing for the next life, because we don't get a second one. And so if
Mm.
we look at life as, as men, this will resonate with you and I, but as kind of a warrior, and we're in this battle, right? And so how awful would it be that if we have tools such as like a bow and arrow, and we have a quiver on our back, that we would die on the battlefield with a quiver full of arrows? And so the whole premise is like, shoot the arrows, like empty your quiver in life. And at the same time, a close family friend of ours um, had built this incredible marketing company. His name was Scott Sheffey. And he was just about to transition this business and head into retirement. And he was diagnosed with lung cancer. And 6 months later, he was dead. And
Mm.
so, yeah. And so the combination of this life of impact that I had watched and this book led me to really start asking the questions, what is next? Right? Like each of us has a gift of passion, or something we're good at, or that, been given a gift of, some it's leadership, and some it's making money, some it's driving trucks. Like each of us have our own unique gifts and passions. And it was really stirred in me that why would I go on for one more second not doing vocationally, professionally, those very things that I feel called and gifted to? And so it was in that season after we sold the business, that I began asking those questions and answering them. And that's what really led me to this idea of coming alongside others and seeing unrealized potential. And the thing that really, really frustrated me was when I saw people that would talk about things and then not actually step in and do them. Right. And so that's where this idea of activate your influence stemmed from, was, hey, life is short, and we've got to move and be active and step into to our giftings and callings. And I just so happen to be able to do that and help inspire and equip others to go do that as well. So yeah, that's where it was all came from.
I think people are understanding what you do, but high level, just for our audience, activate your influence. I don't want to put the words in your mouth, but who are you and what do you do?
Yeah. So, I mean, activate your influence truly is the initiative. That's not a play on words for something more cryptic. It really is like, hey, you have influence. Like, let's discover what it is and go activate it. And
Yeah.
it really has become a mindset. It's an initiative it's a way of life. But how we serve clients in that is through leadership coaching and consulting. We do business consulting for small to medium sized companies. So strategic planning, team development, do a lot with process, but everything that's resolve around organizational health within the consulting world. And then tied to that, we also do peer advisory groups, which is probably, if I have favorites, I guess that would be one of my most favorite things that we do. And it's probably one of the only things that I can look at any business leader and say, you need to be involved in. I can't necessarily say that about our business or leadership coaching, even though that's a good thing, or even our business consulting. But any leader that's actually wanting to activate their influence and impart and actually have a true legacy impact should be in a peer group. So kind of tangibly, those are the three things that we do. Leadership and business coaching, business consulting, focus on organizational health, building healthy teams, and then also peer advisory groups.
I want to play a little devil's advocate because, it seems like this has gotten, what you're doing it gained a lot of popularity over the last several years. You hear more of executive coaches. I had one for several years, and I'll talk more about that later. But for those people out there that are kind of just like, this is another thing, a guy wanting money to come alongside me. But talk about the real impact, because I've seen it personally and professionally with our organization. When we hired an executive coach, we went from, there was 12 employees to now 70. And that was just over 5 years ago. But talk about, I guess, that mindset of a lot of business owners today. And we're talking directly to them, listen to this podcast, these, different stages, whether it's a 1-truck operator, 5-truck operator, brokerage, a shipping company, trading company, all of them listen to this podcast. Sure. Yeah. But talk about that, I guess, that rut or that place that they get stuck as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, because I've been there, I've witnessed it, but talk about the purpose of why you all do what you do.
Yeah. So, the purpose behind it is truly to leave through marketplace. We believe that business is an incredible conduit to make a difference in families, in communities. Just think about a business and what it is, right? There's so many people that you can have impact with, from team members, clients. I talked about vendors early, communities. And the story that I always tell is, we actually have a executive coaching client through one of our organizations that we serve. They invest in one of their directors this way. And we're literally getting thank you notes from wives, because there's tangible change happening within just the mindsets of husbands, right? And so we use this idea of marketplace leadership and marketplace driven, driving growth and better profits. But at the end of the day, it comes back, it's a heart thing, right? So we're not only just developing in business, but true tangible change. And my other favorite story, we'll call him little Johnny, right? Dad goes home, and because of the leadership development he's getting, he's now investing more time and energy into his family and treating little Johnny better. And little Johnny goes to kindergarten, and therefore then treats the kids in his class better. And the teacher's emailing mom and dad going, hey, what's different with Johnny? And so you ask the question, what's the purpose? That's the purpose, Jared. But for the skeptics out there, look, everybody has a specialty, right? And so we see this all the time, and there was lots of books that have been written on this, but so much of business are actually being led by people who are not entrepreneurs. All right. And so I know that's going to frustrate some of your listeners, because most business owners think that they're entrepreneurs. And the reality is many of them are not. And I don't want to rub anyone the wrong way, but it's really is true. Many of them are actually operators, or they have a gifted skill in something, or they're a technician at something. And we see this all the time. Most of our clients are in that sort of 3rd to 7th year of business. They're hitting their 7th to 10th employee. They're doing anywhere from $250,000 to $10 million in revenue. And they started the business for kind of 2 reasons. One, they want to earn an income, and they want to make money, right? They want to don't let any business owner tell you that they're not in business to make money, because they're lying to you. They are, right? And that's not an ugly thing. It's okay. Okay to do that.
Society's made us think that it's an ugly thing.
Right. The other reason is that they had a skill that they wanted to do on their own or try out on their own, right? And in this case, in the transportation industry, perhaps it's been a driver, right? Who had worked for someone else for 15 years or 20 years or 5 years or whatever it is. They got trained up and they said, no, I want to go do this thing on my own. Where the classic example is like the HVAC tech, right? They get tired of making money for the man. And so they buy the truck and they give incredible service at a fair price, and they love the work that they do. And all of a sudden their business starts growing organically because they're doing all those things well. And all of a sudden they've got 4 trucks and 3 techs, and they've got and the very thing that they love now owns them and is destroying their life because they're not a true entrepreneur or operator. They're a gifted technician, right?
Yeah.
And so I think so often we look at it and we want to be all these things that we weren't designed or wired to be. And the reality is we need help. And so inadvertently, now let me directly answer your question. The hype, yeah, some of the hype does exist because everybody and their brother can be a business coach these days. But the reality is the work that we do is we help people get unstuck from the very thing that often they don't even know that they're stuck in. And so rather than, it's a little bit like, for me, I'm terrible at math. If you ask me even a simple like math equation, I'm going to be real stumped here. So an area that I just use, I pick up a tool, I get some help. I use a calculator, right? And so I think there's this stigma that we're like, if we're in business, we don't want to ask for help. We'll figure it out on our own, or, we don't want to pay someone to do something that we can do. And so for us as business consultants or business coaches, we like when we can find the business at a young stage and get them set up properly. But so often we find them when they're in that mode of stuck, And so I would say there's so many incredible business coaches and consultants out there, and there's some not so great either. But you got to find a partner who can come alongside of you and get in the trenches with you and understand your business. And so often it's simply as asking the right questions and figuring out why we're stuck and having the accountability to go get unstuck. You guys, for our clients who want to focus on the thing that they're really gifted at, like for you talked about that area you were stuck, like, transportation, bulk loads. We want to be able to equip you to go do the thing that you're an expert in, and let us come alongside you and help build the teams and do the thing that you're not so great at, which is at the time probably building the business the right way so that you can have that exponential growth. And eventually, if I'm doing my job well enough, Jared, I've equipped you and given you the tools and the systems and the frameworks to go build your business, and you don't need me anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was someone last year, another business owner in our space, a client, and he made a comment one time, and man, it was a text he sent to me, but it was like, Jared, being on top is one of the loneliest places. And like, I looked at text and I almost started getting teary because there is a sense, like you said, when there is a stigma that you can't ask for help, that if it's a sign of weakness, or you shouldn't be where you are if you're asking for help. Like, you shouldn't be a leader, you shouldn't be a CEO, or you shouldn't be a business owner if you're out there seeking help in these areas. You should know all of that. And I think that's where people get in that mindset of being stuck. It's like, I don't know what to do. I can't figure this out. I don't know where to go. If I ask for help, then it's looking like I'm not where I'm I guess a phony is what I'm saying. You're, an imposter.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's something that any successful, and again, this whole idea of success, like, that could be defined 32 different ways, depending on who you're talking to. But, in our culture, we celebrate success by people who, have climbed the ladder or grew the business or 10x or have the most followers or whatever it is. So I would say too, that we need to put some distance between what, our culture says is success and world is success, because really it's whatever you define it as. And that's one of the first questions that I ask any leader is, let's define success for you, because if we're comparing our success to someone else, guess what? We'll fail every time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I think if you name some of the most, quote, successful leaders that I'm guessing that 100% of them have people in their corner cheering them on. They're vulnerable enough to ask for help and admit that they don't have it all figured out. And they're strategic and wise enough to find people in their lives who can help fill those gaps and speak life and speak wisdom into those areas where we don't know it. Look, I do this for a living, but I have a personal spiritual mentor, and I've got an incredible network of people that I can be very vulnerable with, and more than one person who is happy to point out all my blind spots as well. So,
There was, the town or a company here in town, excuse me. There's a company here in Springfield, arguably probably one of the top 10, probably top 5 largest trucking companies in the US. And the guy was telling me that the owner of the company hired this executive coach. It was years ago to say, hey, he had actually went bankrupt before, but then wanted another shot at trying to build this business. And today, I mean, Prime Inc., I think they run 8,000 trucks.
oh wow.
But he was just talking about, like, he hired this coach to come in and really see his blind spots where he was missing and focus on, hey, if you want to get to this number of trucks or this amount of revenue or whatever that be, here's how you got to be it. So, like, it was interesting hearing that, like, it's like most of these executives in all different sizes, they've all had coaches that have got them where they are. I want to go back and probably camp out here and kind of and end it on this one, but talk about that, because you said something like, kind of a lot of these small business owners, they're, the HVAC guy, then they've got these trucks. It's just like, I'm picturing in my head a lot of our clients. I mean, there's a lot of people out there stuck that they were a company driver, they got their own authority, they got a couple trucks now, in the, the economy's turned on them, line haul rates have gone down, costs and everything's back up right now. I mean, they're seeing razor thin break even margins. How would you come alongside someone like that, from your view, to give them, basically to help, to get them in a path of, like, hey, we can get through this?
Yeah. I mean, Jared, this is a really good question, because when things are thin, there's so often we want to start asking why, and like, well, how do we get out of this thing? And we want to start blaming other things, and you're
blaming everybody else.
Yeah. I wish there was like a one size fits all or one solution. Well, hey, just read this book, or here's my little tidbit of advice. But I think your question is layered. And so I think the first thing I would say is it really does come back to mindset and perspective. In a season like now that you just described, where things are thinning out, it's not like it once was. And let's face it, in the trucking industry, like, we've had years of really, really good. It's been really good. And, I don't want to go into all the lessons of, like, oh, we should learn this or that. But I think in the season right now, I think what people need to very much remember is that this industry is still very strong and it is not going away. And it's hard, I think, because a lot of people got into the trucking business when it was good, and they came for that reason, right?
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong with entering a market that's good. But I think what we can't forget is that everything is cyclical. And in any industry. And it is very easy when we start to see things trending down to go into panic mode, or, oh, this thing's falling out and we need to exit, or we need to make this, strategic move. And listen, I don't want to ignore the fact that, like, that things are tight. And when things are tight, you have, sometimes we do have to make drastic decisions as business owners.
Mm-hmm.
But I think my biggest encouragement would be, let's have the right perspective and not make drastic moves. And who can you strategically align with and partner with for long-term relationships? That way, the next time in 7 years or 10 years or the 15, whatever the next cycle is, that you've built healthy relationships with people who are going to remember that when things are thin. And for some of us right now, that sounds like, okay, well, that's a longer term answer. That doesn't solve my, putting food on the table today. But I just would encourage all of us to remember that this is an incredible industry and it's cyclical. And you may have to experience, I don't want to call it a famine, but a season of the grind. And I think for many of your listeners, we don't really know what that is. I mean, maybe you can answer that better, Jared, but, like, how many of your people did enter the market in the last 5 to 7 years when it was so good?
Yeah, quite a few. Well, and back to the example, and again, the company that I mentioned that now has 8,000 trucks. I mean, he faced that famine and he had to go walk through that. but look where the company is today. And I would almost say he probably attributes a lot to the failures that he had. Same thing you pointed out in the very beginning, talking about the failures of people don't, I mean, the definition of failure could really be learning an opportunity later.
Yeah. Let me tell you, let me just share this example with a quick story that it just hit me like a ton of bricks last week. So on our farm, we have a conservation reserve enhancement program. We have 19 acres which gives a buffer between our streams and our farmland. And in Pennsylvania, it's a big thing around our streams. And when we planted that, we had to make a decision that we were going to stop farming that acreage to invest in this program. And so we did that. And there's some uncertainty about the ending of these programs, right? It's government funded and, but about year 3 of this, where all of our trees, we planted, I don't know, some 50,000 trees. It was an incredible feat. About year 3, we're just starting to see these trees come out of the tubes. They're just starting to gain some strength, and we're starting to see some leaves, and I'm getting really excited about the progress. And in that year, we had to mow it and maintain it, and it was beautiful. But we got a flood. And that flood ended up decimating about 50 to 60% of the trees that we had just planted and nurtured and sprayed and mowed, and literally like knocked them all over. And the tubes that were meant to protect them actually all filled with mud and with dirt, and literally they couldn't grow. So we hired a crew to come in, and we spent countless hours out there straightening these trees back up, putting the stakes back in the ground, and we got probably back to about 90, 95%. And mind you, we have to maintain 70% to stay eligible with the program. Okay. So we spent countless hours out there cleaning this thing up. We take great pride in it. And about 3 weeks later, another flood comes that was even worse than the previous flood, knocked down all of the trees that we had just replanted and fixed. And even more so to the point where we were like, what are we going to do? Right. And so I'm sharing this story because I want to attribute it. Like some of us were in the flood right now, right? Like we can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. Like rates are thinning, things aren't looking good. Right. But what happened during that flood, well, what I thought was this terrible thing, and I was ready to give up. What actually happened is this flood came in and it deposited native Pennsylvania seeds from dozens of miles upstream. And I didn't even know this was happening. So all these seeds were being deposited in this fertile, wet soil that this flood had prepared. Okay. The previous flood. The second flood comes in and deposits all of these seeds, and we never saw it. Like in the moment of the flood, all we could see was
disaster.
Like this stinks. How are we going to recover? What are we going to do? And it was in that we didn't know that it happened, but it was about 2 years later that we started seeing the fruit of all of this. And all of a sudden, what seemed like disaster ended up becoming some incredible fruit, because behind the scenes was all of these seeds that have been planted in the disaster. Mm-hmm. Now our crepe stand is being told about as all these other farms want to come and look at what we're doing right. And the reality is all we did was go through the grind, pick all the trees back up, and see the season of drought through. And it was in that behind the scenes stuff that we couldn't even see that was building out this beautiful crepe stand, because all of these trees now came up, and we have some 500 to 600% of all of the trees that were even planted because of this beautiful thing that happened. And so the metaphor here is, look, this is all cyclical. It's a tough season. We don't know how long it's going to last, but it will come back. And it's what you do in the drought, in the season. The seeds that you plant now will be the fruit that you get in 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years. And I know it's really hard for some of us to see that far out when we're trying to put food on the table, but it's the relationships that you develop now, and it's the loyalty of people in your circle that you develop now that will allow you to reach the fruit on the other side of it. And so I know that some of us are in the thick of it and trying to navigate this, but maintain right perspective and get people in your corner who can cheer you on And look, misery loves company too, right? Like there's a reason why you have an opportunity to get people in your corner, because it's okay to talk about the things that aren't going well and the struggles, and like, but that's how we get better. And so I share that story, like what seeds can you be planting now when everything looks really tough?
Mm-hmm.
Because there is another side in a couple of years or a couple of months, like we don't know. And so stay the course. And it's in the refining of these difficult times is when the fruit really, really gets developed.
Yeah. So good. Rodney, I think we could continue to talk about this, but we're about out of time. I'm going to put your link in the show notes. So if people are listening, they'll be able to see, just so they can go to your website. But if you don't mind, just kind of talk through, and I know you guys may not have openings for new clients, but if someone wanted to reach out, they had a question or just want to see how your process works, walk through that process of kind of how you work with clients.
Yeah. So, I mean, this is going to sound cliche, but it really is the truth. Like it starts with a conversation. And so typically the message that we have will resonate with a certain demographic of people. And I will say this, it is not for everybody. The work that we do, even like being a client of ours, is not for everybody, because we will hold you accountable. We will discover and unpack the giftings and where you want to take your organization or your business, because all of those things are so important. But like, not everybody can deal with a coach. You talk about blind spots. Listen, I've had more than one client look at me and be like, I'm not sure we're a good fit. Well, yeah, we're not a good fit because you don't want to have true accountability in your life. So I would say, number one, Jared, it's not for everybody. It's not for your people who, we talked about this earlier, who think they know it all or think they can do it all themselves. But yeah, it starts with a conversation. And yeah, we'd be delighted. So often we'll get introduced to people, and just even in an initial conversation, we can add value. It doesn't have to be an engagement. For some, it will become that. But my heartbeat is I want to add value in every conversation that we have. So yeah, I mean, it could be as simple as an email or give us a call at the office. And that's engaging conversation. We can learn a little bit more about, their organization and kind of what they're facing and where they're feeling stuck. And then, and only then, if we see that there's a mutual fit that we can actually provide value tangibly, would we entertain the idea of, jumping in to a more formal engagement. But yeah, it starts with the conversation.
Perfect. Well, again, if you're listening right now, all the information will be down below in the show notes. So you can click down there and it'll get you to Rodney's page, Activate Your Influence. Rodney, I can't thank you enough for coming on. I didn't know where this conversation was going to lead. I kind of put you on the spot when I asked you last week, but this was so refreshing more than anything. And I think people needed to hear that message. Specifically in this time, I think everything that's going on, we still know that this is cyclical, that we will rebound from it. We're going to learn from this. And I think so many times we can get so, if I can't say just tunnel vision and clamp down. And man, it was just a breath of fresh air to hear you. So thank you so much for coming on the BulkLoads Podcast. I look forward to meeting you face to face one day. But man, your family is so awesome. So glad that I got acquainted with you all. Thank you very much. God bless you.
Yeah, Jared, truly my pleasure. An honor to be here. Thanks again.
Well, I hope you enjoyed this conversation with Rodney and myself. Again, I wish I would have met Rodney out there when we were out in Lancaster. His brother, the whole family is just amazing. And I've said this before, that area is so pristine, Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. Just every square inch is just manicured. Like it just feels like, I don't know, not real.
Yeah, there's a ton of trucking farming operations out that way too. It's like its own little hub.
Yeah. So cool. Well, Rodney, thank you for coming on. Man, that was not what I expected for we talked before, but like we took a different angle, and just the wisdom that he shared is just so valuable. So thank you. We'll put Rodney's information below if you want to reach out to him and his coaching services. The Bulk Freight Conference, are we 6 weeks out?
Yeah. We're down to the wire. It's coming up. It feels like it's like any minute now. Like we're going to be.
Yeah. Rodney and his brother, Ryan, they're going to be there. A lot of other people. We want you there. Again, go to bulkfreightconference.com. The link is below. If you have any reservations, reach out to us. I say this, and I'm putting this out open. If you can't afford it, reach out to me. I want you to go. We'll figure out a way to get you here.
Yeah.
Please.
Yeah, it's going to be a good time. It's going to be bigger and better than ever. We're going to have, it's a 3-day event. We're going to have a cocktail evening. It's all centered around networking. Really, the whole conference is centered around networking and just education on how you can build your business, tips and tricks you can learn, take home to your business to continue to grow it. But also really just prioritizing making connections so you can go home and you have those lifelong connections to grow your business.
It's over 3 days, but it's really like a 2-day event.
Yeah.
Because it's Wednesday night. So you still have, all day Wednesday to get business done, travel in. It's all day Thursday. That's the day you want to come in, or that's the one you don't want to miss, the 17th. And then if you need to leave Friday, we have some Friday morning sessions, but you can, again, you're not locked or obligated to any of it. So again, can't preach it enough. BulkFreightConference.com. Get your tickets. It'll be the best thing that you can do for 2025.
Yep. Live music, food, equipment, show trucks, massive.
What else is there?
There's a comedy show.
I was just thinking this morning on my drive in, it's like, hopefully people enjoy this stuff as much as I do. Like the stuff that we share, the people that we're bringing, I'm like, man, hopefully there's a lot of like-minded people that love this type of stuff, like seeing big rigs and the farming and ag and all that. I know there is, but I get too excited about it. So I'm not nervous yet, but that'll come when it gets closer.
Surprisingly, I'm not super stressed. I don't know if
you're always I've never seen you stressed. You're always even keel.
Whenever it comes down to the wire, I'll probably get a little stressed.
Yeah, cool. Well, before we close out of here, 2 things. The market still is tough out there. A couple services, and I don't ever make selfish plugs, but I know smart freight funding, cash right now is king. If you need help, rates are down, or you need quick cash, get a hold of us. A couple things people don't realize, and I don't probably over talk about it, but smart freight funding, there's no contracts or fees. So if you just need the services temporarily, talk to us. We can help you out with those services. We can get you paid same day on your loads. And again, at very minimal fees. We try to keep it as low as possible to cover our costs. And, but yeah, smart freight funding. If you need quick cash, reach out to us. We want to help you there. So
awesome.
Cool. As we do on everyone, we want to pray. Before we pray, we have a prayer line. It's prayer@BulkLoads.com. We want to pray for people out there. And we also want to praise. So if it's a celebration or if it's a need, we want to hear about it. If it's a retirement, we want to hear about it. If it's a need out there, if it's a cancer, disease, something wrong, man, let us know. We want to be praying for you. And I will close us out today. Heavenly Father, we thank you for people like Rodney that are out there being a light and sharing your goodness and just your faith. We know that it is a struggle out there, Lord, and we pray for this community. We pray that we can be servants for you and help those out there in any way, shape, or form. So give us the courage and boldness to step out there and again, serve the need of the people out there in this country. Lord, we love you and we thank you every day for what you provide for us. Amen. Thank you as always for listening to the BulkLoads Podcast. We have so much cool stuff coming on. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We have a lot of cool videos in the pipeline. I did an interview just last week with Mike Kehoe, the governor of Missouri. I'll tell you more about that, but it was awesome. But go ahead and check that clip out as well. Thank you so much for watching. And as always, God bless.